Good morning, my name is Hannah Callaham, and I'm going to be doing an IOP creative on the application of the rhetorical devices and its influence on society. Okay, my thesis. Okay, so to what extent does the application of ethos, pathos, and logos in Martin Luther King Jr.'s I've Been to the Mountaintops influence its audience to participate in a fight for freedom and equality in America? So my rationale. I will be addressing ethos, pathos, and logos in Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, I've Been to the Mountaintop, by taking on the role of a young journalist who recently attended the speech in 1968, and I will be presenting to the board of a newspaper, in this case, the Greensboro Daily newspaper in North Carolina, and you guys will be the board, and I will be taking this role as I'm trying to present to them as why this is such a significant speech and why it should be placed on the front page of the newspaper. In my defense, I will be using the rhetorical triangle to give an example of why it's so significant, how it influences the audience, to making it one of the most significant speeches of the time. I chose a specific method because I feel like it gives the audience and my classmates a new perspective on not only the speech, but hopefully a newfound knowledge of ethos, pathos, and logos, and how it can be applied specifically to an audience and to people in America, especially in this time. Okay, so now I'm going to begin taking on the role of the newspaper journalist. Hello, my name is April McKenzie, and I am here with you today to be discussing Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech. So as you all know, a few days prior to today, Martin Luther King has unfortunately passed away, but some people don't know of his speech that he just gave. And I would like to present to you today of why I believe that this speech and the article I wrote in the speech should be placed on the front newspaper. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview of the speech. So it was given April 3rd, a few days prior to today, at the Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. And he and the members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were in that town to support an ongoing strike for sanitation workers. So the speech addresses not only America's future, nonviolence, and specifically concerning human rights, and the importance of nonviolence and also the survival of humanity. I really believe this is a really, really significant speech and uses certain methods to really influence an audience, which makes a great speech. So like I said, the significance of speech not only was his final public speech before his death, which gives it a lot of significance, it influenced the audience using ethos, pathos, and logos, which are a part of the rhetoric triangle, which I will get to in a moment. And this helps influence an audience to participate for a fight in human rights. So, the rhetoric triangle. If you could please refer to the handout I passed out. I gave a brief definition of each of the parts of the triangle. So ethos is an appeal to ethics, and it is a means of convincing someone of the character or credibility of the persuader. So basically using ethics to make the audience really understand, like, is this ethical, and really influences them. So pathos uses a different tool. It uses emotion. So this is a way of convincing an audience of an argument by creating an emotional response. Like, let's say you're discussing about a childhood, it might make you emotional or something bad that happened. It makes you really want to pay attention and learn more. And then the last one is logos, and this appeals to logic. So it is a way of persuading the audience by reason, by true facts that really gives the speech significance. And Martin Luther King Jr. used this in all of his speeches, but I feel like he used this one in this speech in a very unique way that really made it one of the most influential speeches of our time period right now. So first I'm going to start with how he used ethos in his speech to really influence the audience. And like I said, this refers to ethics. So, I have two quotes on the board, and I will read them out loud to you. We are saying that we are God's children, and that we are God's children, we do not have to live like we are forced to live. Basically, this really uses ethos and ethics to really talk about how you're being forced to live. Is it ethical to be forced to live the way we are living now, the way that people in America are being forced to live? The next quote I have here is, the issue is injustice. The issue is the refusal of Memphis to be fair and honest in its dealing with its public servants who happen to be sanitation workers. Now, we've got to keep attention on that. So I highlighted the words injustice, fair, and honest because that all refers to ethics. And this is just one of many examples of how he used the fact of ethics to really persuade an audience. So this could persuade an audience in many different ways. It could persuade the audience to really, by using these specific words, like, is this fair? Is this logical? Is this ethical at all? which would really help. And then in this case, since the speech was mainly about the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, public servants, is that ethical? Now I'll be discussing pathos and how this really influenced the audience in the speech, giving it a lot of significance. And like I said before, this appeals to emotion. So I have 3 more quotes on the board. So like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. So I've highlighted the phrases, live a long life and God's will. So if you're unaware, this could really appeal to pathos or emotion, but people can be really emotional when discussing about religion. It could really draw in, and this could also be ethics or logic as well to many people, depending on how you look at it. But really, any religious person in the audience that might be viewing or listening to the speech or wanting to know what this is all about, if we should fight for this, what's going on right now, talking about religious purposes, God's will, could really influence an audience to think a certain way, as well as talking about living a long life. And Martin Luther King Jr. uses this a lot in this speech, talking about a long life. And unfortunately, he just passed away a few days prior today. But this could also bring in emotion. The next quote I have is that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. This also has to do with death, and I would like to do a little drop story about what he's talking about here, because it might sound a little funny if you haven't heard the speech. In his speech, he gives a brief story about how he was stabbed, and if he would have merely sneezed, he would have passed away. And that really could have drawn an audience. That's insane. It could really create an emotional response, making people believe how insane and how crazy what's going on in America right now is. And he also talks about a little girl in the letters that this little girl wrote to him, which could also bring an emotional response using pathos. The next quote I have is, we aren't going to let any mace stop us. We are masters in our own nonviolent movement. It's disarming police forces. They don't know what to do. I've seen them so often. Now, I've highlighted nonviolent movement because what's going on in America right now, he and everyone with him, they're fighting for a nonviolent movement. There's so much violence towards us and them right now that by saying what they're doing, macing them, that could create an emotional response, but also ethics and logic as well. But I feel in this case, mostly pathos because of emotion. It could make an emotional response, what if that was your child out there fighting for human rights, for equality, and they're getting maced by police forces who are supposed to be protecting us out there. The last one I want to discuss with you guys is logos. And like I said before, this appeals to logic. So, I only have one quote for this one, and there are many others, but I feel like this is the most significant one he used in his speech. So, but somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. And so just as I say, we aren't going to let dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. We are going on. Now, I'm sure you are aware of what this is referring to, but it is the Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment. And this appeals to logic because many people find it logical to follow our Constitution, to follow what's right. This could also use, I think, ethos and ethics, but really using words such as freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. It uses the word freedom, we should be free, we should have equality. This could really influence an audience to say, I want to fight for what's going on right now. I feel like all 3 of these make, all these different facts that he put in this specific quote really draws in an audience and really, really influences them. And I feel like this is one of the most significant quotes. And in my article on the speech, I include this in there. Because we are Americans, and in our time period of the 1960s, are we really do we really have this going on right now? We should really be focusing on these. So this is just one of the ways that logos is used throughout the speech, ethos, pathos, and logos. So let me give you an overview. So using rhetorical devices throughout the speech, which is the ethos, pathos, and logos, is really what makes it a great speech. And what is a great speech? A great speech has to influence an audience, has to persuade the audience in some way. And by his use of all these things, by talking about religion and children and death and life and freedom, can really influence an audience in a way to make you want to fight for civil, human rights, equality in America, but also in a nonviolent movement. I feel that it is important that this happen, and that this should be the reason that is one of the most influential speeches of our time period here and now, and then why it should be put on the front page of your newspaper.